Welcome back once again, and to be shedding more light, taking a deeper look over what happened yesterday and earlier today. We're very delighted to be having with us over the phone Dr. Monica Williams, the international relations expert and political analyst. Good morning, Dr. Monica.
Good morning.
Your own assessment of what happened earlier today, real quick, because to get into detail of Egypt's reaction, we need to be updated over what happened earlier today, and how do you assess it?
Of course, if we try to tackle with a very complex situation, of course, the high-blood assassination of Ali Khamenei, which represents one of the most important and consecutive political in modern Middle Eastern history, target strikes against military commanders or nuclear scientists, as we see last conversation last June. The killing of Iran's supreme leader would be perceived an attempt at regime declaration rather than tactical difference. So such as event would fundamentally alert the strategic equation across the region, as it's very important. And on the other side, we follow up that the internal Iranian dynamics and the role of Ali Larijani as Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council were declare institutional continuity and confirm that the state remains operational or cohesive. So this message will be clear to the United States and Israel. Of course, the Iranian system hasn't collapsed, and it's very important to tackle with this statement. A swift and composed statement from Algeria would serve three primary: prevent internal instability, aim to reassure the population and security forces that the chain of command remains intact and that constitutional mechanisms are in motion, signal strategic control, its communication externally, Iran remain operational capability and capable of responding to the calculated manner. And if we try to also tackle with Egypt's reaction, which is very important, and it's part of rejection of regional escalation risks, as we see there is a lot of direct strikes against Qatar and Saudi Arabia and so on. Egypt tries to adapt a position centered on displacement, sovereignty, and regional stability. There is a lot of Egypt's response likely include official commendation, call for immediate restraint, and urge all parties to exercise maximum restraint and return to diplomatic channels. Of course, it's part of Egypt's doctrine.
Right. Earlier, His Excellency, the Head of State President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, have had earlier contacts with most Arab leaders, on top of them Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Bahrain, and he firmly and openly rejected the striking of the sovereignty, in general, invading the sovereignty of those countries, and the strikes that targeted the land there. So, speaking about the situation in general, Iran's retaliating to the strikes of the U.S. and Israel, and the other part is again escalating their bombardment. Concerning Egypt's reaction, Foreign Minister Badr Abdel-Ati have contacted his counterparts, Arab counterparts and European ones, and they all agreed on prioritizing the negotiations and the diplomatic solutions. But on top of all, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi have stated that any military intervention is not preferred at all and is going to escalate the dangers more. How do you read those statements by the Egyptian administration?
Of course, before we tackle with this statement, we have to also talk about the situation. As we mentioned, there is a lot of consequences and results of what we are tackling now. The Iranians have many of capabilities, and on the other side, U.S. and Israel try to tackle or confront or collapse the system. So Egypt tried to understand data legislation behind these approaches, which is very important to tackle. As you mentioned, the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, there is a lot of message concentrated carries a stable message to Washington and Tel Aviv. Arab states don't seek a wedding concentration. Regional stability must be sacrificed for tactical gains. Any declaration or military strategy risks destabilizing the broader Arab security architecture. So Egypt's position now as a stabilizing actor, which is very important. The diplomatic activity reflects also and always a shift from reactive policy to permanent containment diplomacy. Egypt tried to shape the government or the sphere by building confidence among moderate regional actors, signal unified opposition to uncontrolled escalation, and reduce initiative for either side to escalate further. So it's very important. And on the other side, when we tackle a mass escalation tension between Iran, Israel, and Islamic nations, Egypt try, of course, and Dr. Badr Abdel Aouati, diplomatic negotiation is very important and no longer a temporary option. It's a strategic necessity now. The current conflict carries the risk of transforming from difference into systematic regional instability. In this context, Egypt also tried to reflect the strategy contained or centered focus on containment, dialogue, and conflict management. The logic underneath Egypt's diplomatic engagement is rooted in realism, as a full-scale war in Gulf countries will be remain localized, or it would disrupt energy markets, maritime security, and trade flow, which directly impact Egypt and, of course, the international interest, particularly through different Red Sea corridors. So Egypt try and approach precise immediate displacement perceive of regional state sovereignty and protection of economic stability.
Mm. Right. In case there is, it seems that going back to the negotiating table is somehow a little bit unrealistic, given the fact what's happening now within what
Yes.
we're seeing, especially that they were sitting on the negotiating table in Geneva only hours later or days before those strikes, which seemed to be not taken seriously. But at the same time, speaking about the possible dangers of the escalation of this situation inside the Middle East, we have the maritime activities or security, which is the Hormuz Strait, and we have also this national security of neighboring countries, and we have the American bases that are being hit regularly, of course, in retaliation for the American strikes, and we have. So chaos is going to prevail, and there are fears that there won't be enough ability to contain this chaos. Do you agree with that or no?
Of course, let's tackle with at this stage. Return to diplomatic negotiations appears highly unlikely, as you mentioned exactly. The combination of targeted assassinations, strategic escalation, and indirect attacks on leadership structure has fundamentally alerted the political environment. Once the conflict shifts into what's perceived as the clear logic, targeting senior leadership on domestic centers of power, the psychological and the strategic threat for negotiations rises significantly. So while negotiations are unlikely now, it's very important to ask this question. Assassination and political interrupted not as tactical military action, but it's and in fact, of course, atmosphere becomes politically costly and domestically for any leadership involved. And escalation against U.S. bases in the region, if you also mention conflict transfer from bilateral confliction into a multi-lateral regional crisis. So this complicated diplomacy because additional actors become stakeholders in the escalation cycle. and lots of political space for moderation. It's very important, and negotiation may be framed internally as weakness or surrender. So it's very important also for the first or fourth point. Its side is attempt to establish credibility through calibrated and diplomatic engagement. If we try to negotiate where to resume what would be required in Vienna, supposedly it's tomorrow, Monday, if of course not happened what happened yesterday. There is a tour of negotiations tomorrow in Vienna, also unlikely in immediate term. Any eventual return to will require mutual system of targeted killings and leadership threats, guarantees regarding the security and regional energy infrastructure, clear limits on missile deployment and the proxy engagements, and international guarantee, possibly involving major powers such as China and European states, and of course Russia.
Dr. Monica, political observers, some of them noted to the fact that we are observing a scenario where the United States are striking suddenly. One morning they wake up and they strike a country claiming that this country possesses nuclear arms and is activating uranium, without any evidence or reports from the International Atomic Energy Agency or any approval from the United Nations, which is international legal community. But in reality, they are repeating the scenario of Venezuela. They want to topple the regime to be in full control of the oil of Iran. Do you agree with that scenario? Or if it's not, which one of them is true? Which one of them is most likely? The first one or the second one?
Of course, there is a difference between both situations in Venezuela and U.S. intervention in Iran. And of course, there is a lot of profound legal and political required. The debate inside even the United States, particularly among Democrats, would likely center on international law. They observe or reject this state from Egypt, from Trump administration. Within the United States, of course, divide between exclusive military action and congressional oversight. The need for Congress authorization before major military operation, adherence to international law, as you mentioned, and UN Charter principle, avoiding open-ended military engagements like Iraq or Afghanistan. Of course, it's very important. If U.S. were perceived as storming into Iran without broad international taking or legal justification, opposition voices a violation of state sovereignty, but we still don't don't tackle with this or the international law and the global reaction. Of course, the use of force is generally permanent only in case of self-defense or with UN Security Council authorization. So any unilateral intervention without clear legal justification would face strong criticism from China and Russia, as we said earlier, or European alliances or non-alien states. So such move weakens the credibility of the international law-based order and reinforce. But if we try to tackle also, there is a lot of weakness regarding the international organization or the international law. We follow this issue from 2023, I guess.
Hello?
Yes?
Are you still there, Dr. Monica?
Yes.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
I say that we witness the weakness of the role of the international law and the international organization regarding UN Charter or UN agencies, of course.
So that sounds reasonable, but at the same time, talking about something that might be a little bit positive in all that chaos that is prevailing the region, and especially the Middle East. talking about the soft power of the Egyptian administration. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi have been recognized with that particular miracle or privilege, which is his soft power and a very soft diplomacy. And throughout his tenure, while he stepped into office, ever since, even before 2019, when we assumed the African Union and leadership and chairmanship and all that, we have succeeded in sorting out many crises. And lately, the last one was in Sharm el-Sheikh, the peace summit. We succeeded in prevailing peace and issuing a peace agreement with the attendance of more than 150 nations that are joining hands with us under our umbrella. With the on top of them is the United States and President Donald Trump himself, when he approved of President Sisi's policies. So do you think within Egypt's hands soft diplomacy now, the Egyptian administration could be able to get into this situation and try to be able to bring the probably two parts together into some fair solution?
Of course, as you say that Egypt adapted a strategy rooted in soft diplomacy and the crisis management, as we witness and follow up this achievement or this approach regarding Sharm el-Sheikh or the agreement. And of course, Egypt has this credibility or based on of course, the strategy is not based on hard power protection but diplomatic engagement, maintaining open channels with opting parties and coordinators with Gulf states, and supporting ceasefire negotiation, advocates de escalation in international forums. So Egypt understands very well that prolonged conflict in the region would directly affect the regional interests and maritime security and energy flow and economic stability. And of course, we have and we add some very important or valid points regarding President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in 2040, as you try to read the history. Egypt and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi worked towards build on Arab stabilization access, consolidate and moderate Arab diplomatic front, focus on crisis containment, prevent regional spillover, and support ceasefire agreement, encourage negotiated settlement. And this not military alliance but a political coordination mechanism aimed at reducing escalation initiatives. So Egypt has a long and preactive procedures and strategy create space for political dialogue and reduce civilian harm, prevent regional contained or supplies markets and security perception. Egypt resisted, involved in Gaza ceasefire, and of course often in Iran file and demonstrate its capability to act as an immediately acceptable to multiple parties. So Egypt's geopolitical awareness, as it's very important, it's know and recognize the vulnerability of regional deterrence balance, the economic consistency of this escalation, the risk of proxy warfare expansion, and the importance of maintaining a strategy or strategic autonomy.
Right. At this note, we'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Monica Williams, the international relations expert and also a professor also and political analyst. Thank you so much. And